Folding phones are everywhere. It's like two devices that have come together to form one device, often for twice the price of what a normal phone would be. But the whole landscape right now has been showing off folding phones for years. Samsung, Google, a whole bunch of others, and now Apple is supposed to be making its own at the iPhone event this fall. So what do we expect from what they're gonna do? How are they gonna do things any differently? Are they gonna connect this with what the iPad is? Are they going to elevate the landscape? And how freaking expensive could this device be? Let's get into all of that now and riff on Apple's folding phone amongst all of its other phones.
Yeah, so the rumor is it's going to be called the iPhone Ultra. So right there, you know, or theoretically, it's past the Pro, or is it below the Pro? Which is the whole thing. Where's Pro in Apple's mind? Because the Pro and the Pro Max they're spec'd out, right? They have like the best of everything. The Pro Max has more.
Yes.
Right? So is this basically the iPhone Air? Because essentially the iPhone Air is half of a folding phone. That's how these thin devices show up. If you have two iPhone Airs, are you happy with that? Like, what do you think?
I think it depends on what you do with them, because you're right, like the iPhone Air, you're losing some stuff. And that's, right now, they still talk about the Pro Max being a more refined camera, and that's kind of similar to what Samsung is doing too. I mean, I feel like you have a lot of these companies that are saying like, well, if you want like the best camera, is it necessarily gonna be on the Fold? Maybe it is now. I haven't even been following all those beats, but Apple could make that camera a little less impressive, and reports say that it may not have Face ID, so you may go back to Touch ID, which some people may like that, and other people may go, what the heck? And you're gonna have a first generation product, which, I think we were talking about, like, ends up being something that you inevitably feel like, oh, I got first in the door, but I was probably the last to get the really good stuff that comes later.
Yeah, I'm assuming that the first buyers of this foldable phone will be like the Apple Watch buyers, where like it doesn't really have a problem to solve. Everyone's like, what is this watch for? What does it do? When Apple figured out and all the feedback was health, 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 the Apple Watch became this massive health device. And it's also easy to justify your purchase if you're first ahead. You're like, okay, I bought this thing, and yeah, it's awesome. It's always awesome because I spent $1,000 on it. It better be awesome. I think you have some of that too. So whatever this device is gonna be, I don't expect it to be anything like what it's gonna be in the future. And then you still have this problem between iOS and iPadOS. And we're not even talking about macOS.
Right, and that's the thing in the middle here that I'm most curious about with Apple is the iPad, because I think about the original history of this, which is that Steve Jobs had said that the iPad was originally conceived before the iPhone, and that it was like tablet idea, and then it was, hey, let's put this on a phone. And is this kind of the closing of the loop? Do they present this as, well, we always kind of imagined this, and now we have a device that does both, and that was the way we always envisioned it. We're not just new to the party, we always had this idea in mind. And if so, is this actually also an iPad? Because the dimensions look like they're lining up to be the same as an iPad mini. That's what the new aspect ratio on Samsung's one and others have been lining up to be. But if that's the case, is it iPad OS? Or is it a new OS? Are we forking the fork further? And does that mean you don't need to get an iPad, or do you feel like you still might also need to get an iPad?
Yeah, the rumors so far have reported that it's not going to be running iPad OS. It's going to be another version of iOS, which confuses the heck out of me because iOS is not exactly a multitasking machine. If you want, you can go from one thing to the next. You can go sequentially. But if you want two apps at once, it better be a video, maybe, and then you have something else going on. You don't get to do a lot of super productive things on iOS right now. iPad OS does have some kind of computer-like function, but it's not a Mac. So you have these, I'm almost this, I'm almost good, I'm almost good. If Apple comes up with an iOS Plus or Fold OS or whatever it's gonna be, they have to teach people how to use this. And if this is the device to get people to buy iPads in the future, if you have the same OS, it's easy to go that way, but then you would never buy an iPad. So without killing the iPad, you need to have a different OS, but you will never get people to go from iOS Plus to iPad OS because it does some of the same stuff, maybe.
Right. Or is this sort of like a natural cannibalism that happens in products? Because I think about like the iPod, and then you think about the iPhone, and then there is an eating up of that happens that is part of the evolution. But yeah, the iPad, which I've been covering for years, is so weird to me because it is kind of an iPhone, which is what they've always envisioned it to be in terms of a partner product. But then it's also creeping towards kind of being a Mac, and I want it to also be a Mac, and not everyone agrees with me on that. But then like at the high end, it's kind of turning into that. And so is it like the iPad kind of splits its purpose apart and the iPad mini goes away and becomes part of the iPhone, and then the iPad Pros or like this touchscreen Mac that they're doing, is this like the new future Mac-y thing? But yeah, it feels kind of like a midlife crisis for the iPad and maybe for myself. But I'm thinking about that, where this phone comes into play.
Yeah, you said a lot there because Apple does cannibalize its own stuff. When they introduced the iPod Nano, look this up, kids, it cannibalized the Mini because the Mini was the best-selling iPod at the time. They introduced a smaller one. They knew that they were going to eat up sales, but they would rather eat their own sales than let anybody else have a part of that pie. Yeah. So Apple does have a history with this. The question is whether under the new regime, John Ternus, is he going to say, okay, we are going to take our lines, which seem to be kind of a mess. The iPhone has so many models. The iPad has multiple models.
Many, yeah.
Like when Steve Jobs came back to Apple, he showed this like square, like a Punnett square almost, showing the Mac and how it was so nuts before. First, kill all the clones, come back. We're gonna come to 4 products, simple products. I think to introduce another splintering of a device is going to be difficult. It's going to be very difficult because Samsung and Google cannot explain to you why you need a foldable. They can't. If I understand why I need a foldable, but I'm not everybody. I just don't see people going, well, you know what? I could use this. I think it's going to be more of a status symbol than anything else.
Yeah, it probably will, because that's kind of the way it goes. I mean, even though I think about all the function of things, I think about the watch and how the Watch Ultra, for all its extra features, became a status symbol. And I think that's what it is in a lot of ways. Like, some people will be power using it, and some people just like that it's got that chunky look, and that they like that it's a little bit fancier. And that might be, iPhones are something you carry around with you. Everyone's going to want to see it. You're going to want to show it off. And I hope it's more than that. I'm sure it will be more than that, but you're right. Like, early adopters are in that. And that goes to the price too, which is that all of these folding phones are expensive as it is, getting into that like $2,000 range. Is Apple going to eclipse that? Are we going to go crazy high here? Or is this going to be something that feels like the price of 2 iPhones, which would be like $2,200 or something, that's not too far off, but then you're paying up for the extras, which again, who's going to be able to afford that in this economy?
Well, you also said $2,000, but that would be the starting one if you think about it, because you also want more RAM or you want more storage, and that's usually another $200, $300, so you could be looking at $2,500 for a device. I have a very hard time justifying purchasing devices like this because I don't think I'm going to get $2,500 worth of usage. Yes, this number's made up. No, we don't know for sure. But if Apple finally comes up with a DeX. DeX is something from Samsung where you can plug in a phone DeX. And you get this desktop-like experience. If I can use an iPhone Ultra connected to a monitor and I have Mac OS, I'm really serious about this, that would be almost worth the money. My phone is my computer. I don't have to buy a MacBook Pro. I have the iPhone Ultra. It does everything. And when I need to sit there with my laptop, it works wirelessly or something like that. They need to really make this thing ultra. There needs to have a reason to exist.
I want this so badly, and I get mocked by it too, but covering DeX in the past, I agree with you. I think there's a fantasy that happens with tech, which is that I want to be able to not have to have another thing and be able to do my work on the go, and I think it's what smartphones were always about. And Apple's flirted with this a lot in the past. You know, the iPad originally had a keyboard dock, and then they still had the keyboard case. I will invoke Vision Pro, and I will say Vision Pro for its way high price. The whole idea was that it's trying to blow out the idea of what you can do and have all these floating screens and the future of like reinventing how you work. But exactly, there's a path that's already been forged with this in the past. Samsung's looked at this with DeX, and the Neo, to me, was that proof that a Mac can run on a phone chip. So what are we doing here? You could do that, and then some people are like, I don't want that, but technically, couldn't you? And then if you can do that, couldn't you come up with cool ways to work on the go with this in a way that, that would be part of why I get it.
I mean, if you had MagSafe, you could see the accessory makers just salivating over it, no matter what it's going to be. With the larger screen, you can do more things. You'll probably have 2 apps up at once. Apple really needs to explain how to do that, because when I learned how to do multitasking on the iPad, it's like you hold here and you bring it up slightly and it might fill up half, it might not. If it's all gesture based, they better get this down. And you're talking about Touch ID, I think that could be a selling point actually, because people like that. Even though technically Apple says it's less secure, but that's also still available on the iPad mini, I want to say, and the lower end and the iPads. So
I like it. I like this, especially I like the side Touch ID, which is on some of the iPad models. Well, it's on all the iPad models on the side, but yeah.
Yeah, I like that idea. But again, this is first gen. If this is first gen, this kind of feels like the original iPhone. iPhone 1, no App Store, right? No subsidies. You get this phone, you get 4 or 5 apps from Apple, you're good. They wanted progressive web apps. Use that. Then Gen 2 or 3G, they go with an App Store. Now we actually have a use for this thing. If the Fold isn't being supported by developers, which they must be, I'm imagining if September we've seen this, we're gonna be like, oh, we have our partners from Adobe here. Here's what they did. They made it really well. It works really well on this 7-inch screen. Maybe that'll be something. I'm having a hard time with the device that will come out being like baked, fully baked.
The reason why I'm more bullish about it is the idea that Apple has under its belt, like you're saying, so much of iPadOS. There's so many apps that are out there. And if this is forming in the same aspect ratio of the iPad mini, then there are apps that already exist, ready to go. Apple's Creative Suite, all these other different things. And then you could say, boom, all these are gonna run. That feels like a huge advantage because a lot of if I'm right in saying, a lot of the folding phone app landscape, a lot of apps still need to be optimized for that, or you're just running 2 instances and it's not about a full screen thing, or it's not really being thought of for that, whereas Apple has a ton of that. The question for me then also goes into, like you said about all the multitasking, the iPad in the latest OSs has been a little bit of a mess. I like that you can create all these extra screens that float around. I like that it's more Mac-like. I've heard a lot of feedback from people that they don't like that it gets very confusing. And if you do it on a phone, you're gonna wanna think about that a little differently. And then Apple doesn't like to tend to want to confuse people a lot. So you're right. They're probably going to boil it down to a couple of key things, a couple of key interface things that they're going to want you to understand right off the bat. And probably not as many more. It's like, that's all we're talking about today in 2026. So is it a very simple couple of panes that you can split between? Probably. It's probably not a whole bunch of free floating things. And then the deck stuff maybe lies in the future. The docking stuff, as much as I'd want that, I wonder how much they're worried about just kind of losing people completely on it versus just starting with like, here's what we're talking about today. But then the funny thing is, which we didn't talk about, is that they're supposed to be coming out with an iPad mini at the same time. The reports all say that a new OLED iPad mini is possibly coming out
OLED
then, which is just funny because that's literally going to feel like kind of the similar size product, or is that going to be like the Neo in comparison where you say, well, I could just get this and save a lot of money. You could probably buy the phone and the iPad mini of the future for less money than the other, but be a little less portable.
Okay, so the iPads support the pencil.
Yeah.
Macs do not support the pencil. iPhone does not support the pencil.
So will this.
Do you think iPhone Ultra, you think it'll actually support the pencil inside or out, or both, or neither? Because this is something I've been griping about since Samsung discontinued the digitizer layer in the Fold 7. The Fold 6, you could draw on it, write on it on the inside. It was great. It's a great space for that kind of thing. I tried it out with the Fold 8, the new one, perfect sketchpad size. But you can't draw on the thing with a stylus, which drives me really, really nuts. I am a visual thinker, and I like to use those things. Could the Apple Pencil be a point of distinction between iPhone and iPad?
That's a really interesting question. I kind of feel, my gut feeling is that it won't. And that people will want it, and that there's a couple of different reasons I feel this way. Number one, where do you put the pencil? Because then you have to shrink it. You've got to figure out a way to attach it, and is it magnetic? Is it going to charge magnetically? You have to build that in, and then even the way that it interfaces with the display, you have to build that tech in, and they might just be like, you know what, that's too much right now. We're going to leave it out. But then if you don't have it, like you said, for all the iPad things that it does, are you going to miss that? I guess the good news is that I barely use the pencil as it is. So it's like, I know that the iPad works generally just fine without it. And so they might just be kind of leaning on that, like the pencil is such a peripheral that you don't need it as a core part of the OS, that they get away with that. And then maybe they think about that in the future. Because the pencil's so honking big that you don't want to just take that and use it with the thing.
Well, it depends how big the Ultra is, because I was using a Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra, and I had a full-size stylus. It's smaller than the phone because the phone is huge. The Ultra is supposed to be a little squat little thing, kind of like the Passport-looking Fold 8. So you're right about how would you charge this thing, how would you do this. But again, if it's first gen, like the Apple Vision Pro, I think people are just going to make excuses for it. Like, you know what? Yeah, I can't do this, but I love it that I can. I can't carry this. I have to carry it with me this way. Fine. I have to put it on wireless charging. Maybe it'll MagSafe charge.
Right.
Bang, right on the back. We have it. There you go. I just solved it for you right there. MagSafe charging, reverse charging has been done. The thing that you're talking about, like, they have so much research from themselves and competitors. If they couldn't figure out how to magnetize a stylus, I would be shocked. If they can figure out how to remove they can remove the crease theoretically. That's what they're saying.
Right.
With the foldable display that Samsung makes. By the way, this is another fun thing. Samsung wins with this. If that's the case.
Yeah, what would they do? And then it's like, is it thin no matter what? Is that the ultimate thing here? That like, they want to make the smallest one, and then it's like, well, that would just add a little bit more to the equation? Because I do love the idea of writing on it. I think it's like, we're in this like, kind of nice note-taking world, and people kind of get precious about that, and I do sometimes. Yeah, so it's like, I think that would be fun. So it's one of the many questions about this Ultra, this folding iPhone, which is clearly going to be the showcase item. We don't even know if it's going to come out at the same time or whether it'll come out later in the fall, which is also being talked about, but that's only a matter of weeks away. So this is the countdown as we'll figure it out soon enough.
I really hope we get answers.
We'll get answers.
I don't want to just see a little thing spinning on a little platform. I want it 2 weeks ago.
No, historically we'll get answers, but then we may not get it arriving then. We may get like, here it is, coming in late October. So we'll see. But those are our thoughts. I don't know if your wallet has the space for it. I don't think mine does. So those are iPhone folding thoughts in a folding world as two of us talk about it. Thanks for watching. And if you have more thoughts on folding stuff, let us know down below.